August and September are often those months that you are looking at to fund learning and development programs. That is often the time in organizations where budgets are being considered, initiatives are being brought forth, and looking for how are we going to fund those learning and development initiatives. And over again during that time as well is when organizations decide, just like they did in 2023, that budgets were either going to be cut or they were going to be held. Unfortunately, what we see is organizations wanting to make changes, but then not funding the very thing that will help them make the changes and solve the business problems, which is, of course, developing people. So what we wanted to do was to speak to learning and development, HR, and talent leaders and ask them for their sage advice about how they have gotten their learning and development initiatives funded. And we want to share that with you. If you want to learn about that, stay tuned because we are going to be sharing all of the sage advice from these brilliant leaders. How did you initially approach the organization about your ideas to invest in these initiatives?
Yeah, I think the number one place to start is what are the business needs?
Mm-hmm.
So what problem are you trying to solve? And what has to be a business problem that matters to ideally the board, the CEO, the leadership team. And it has to clearly, I think, really starting with what problem versus I have a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
And so being able to articulate what the problem is in the business, what then the solution is going to be, and how it's going to accelerate, amplify, whatever word you want to use, the impact. So I would say that's one.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that I've found incredibly important is to find really key stakeholders as business leaders who can co-champion. So it's not just people teams or learning teams, but it is business leaders who are either, champion it because they see the problem, champion it because they've experienced a similar solution, they've seen the impact, and then they can also help tell the story and help, kind of not have it just be like, oh, the people team or the HR team thinks this, but actually really validates it.
That's so great. That's so great.
We launched things like Myers-Briggs for the whole company. We did a skills assessment and we did training globally on the top skills that the company itself, the people in the company said that they're weaker on and that we need to get better at. So we developed training around all of that. We've worked with each of the departments so that the onboarding that is done for each employee is actually learning based. And it's not a fire hose of information being dumped, but that takes instructional design and that well thought out process. And then working with the leaders specifically, going through things like the 5 dysfunctions of a team and actually carving things out around that. We also have one of my favorite things is I have leadership gatherings every 6 to 8 weeks. And there's always some kind of a learning component to that the leaders are hungry for. And they vote with their feet. They show up. I don't have to go out and say, hey, you're going to come to the meeting.
Yeah, I love that. What were the key factors or arguments you used to convince your organization about the value of these initiatives?
Correct. And I think the problem thinking about it is it a pervasive problem that, that impacts a wide number of people?
Mhm.
Is it a problem that impacts a small number of people, but who are incredibly critical to the organization? So we're also really thinking about articulating the problem statement, but also articulating the benefits, and being able to really think about that equation of, the any anytime a business is going to invest in learning development, it's a trade-off to something else that they're not going to invest in.
Yeah.
And so being able to articulate, again, what is the value, what is the impact, how is it going to benefit the business, people, culture, what is essentially like the ROI of it. And sometimes, that's incredibly difficult to quantify. And yet I think one of the things I love is that right now, I think we're doing, there's a lot of research showing the ROI on learning initiatives. So bringing those to life to be able to tell, both articulate it in terms of the benefit to the organization, but also really using financial terms as much as possible. Coaching. It's not a pervasive problem, but in our case, we have some really incredible leaders where we want to help them become even better leaders.
Mhm.
And as we are thinking about how do we scale, how do we grow the organization, one of our principles is that we want to invest in current talent who understand not only our culture, but also who can then drive, strong business results. We talk a lot about the how and the what. And so for us, it was saying, hey, we believe investing in coaching in some of these leaders who maybe, we believe can do even more. And then exactly, we had a couple of business leaders go through it who then were very vocal and were very willing to share about the transformation it had in their own personal experience. And so that started the flywheel effect. And then we used data to show the impact from our Boxer experience survey to show then how then, before training, after training, and how it made an impact in their results, and helped make some improvements. So it's all of those things, which is, I think, again, why we continue to come back to you and use you.
For those that are listening that don't have some internal mechanism that measures, whatever the Boxer experience survey has a lot of pieces to it, but it's talking about engagement. It's talking, you're tracking manager effectiveness. You're doing all kinds of things. And that's crucial for any learning and development organization to have so that they can go, we did it. Here's pre, here's post, here's what happened. That matters, because you can say that affects retention, that affects who's going to be able to go to the next level in the organization so new people can come up underneath. But if you don't have that, and then you rely on the person that's, the vendor, they may or may not have any way to measure for you. So I think that's just something to underline for people that are thinking about, I've gone into organizations, they don't have anything, they don't even know the problem they're trying to solve. What would you say in hindsight to when you have worked to get budget and have gotten it or didn't get it? What was most effective in gaining agreement around investing, either in coaching or whatever, learning and development? Do you have any sense? And it might be all the things you said, but like, what might be the most important of all of those things that we've talked about that helps you get
The budget. I got the budget I asked for.
Yeah.
Whether or not I can spend the budget right now is more of those kind of questions. Like, for instance, we have found it's very incredibly valuable, since we're global, to have everybody get together, and we want to bring the whole engineering org together in Warsaw. And that's going to be a fairly expensive event. In my budget that I did, that it was approved, yes, this is a good thing, but is now the right time to spend that money? And that's the struggle, is the when on, when we spend money like that, if it's going to be a large chunk. It's not the why. It's the when.
Well, part of why I even joined the company was making sure that I would have people and culture interest from the CEO, as well as autonomy to make those types of proposals. Of course, I would want to, I did a huge survey on like where business needs were the greatest and where we should focus. But I also had a great CEO and a great leadership team that appreciated that investing in learning and having a learning and growth oriented environment can only help produce great results and great outcomes and better collaboration, better individual growth and retention. So I think I had it a little bit easier since this new leadership team that joined all really appreciated and understood that L&D initiatives was critical for the greater organizational success to come.
That's so interesting. One, I just want to reiterate what you're saying. One, you as a people leader made a choice from the initial get-go, right? You chose a company that you felt was going to already be open and knew it wasn't like you were having to educate them and force the issue. So that's really, that's crucial to have at the very top of your organization, some buy-in. But yet you're saying they knew it had value. They knew it drove business results. Was there anything you did or showed or used to make the case for, coaching versus something else, or manager leadership training or like you chose those things? Did you have a way of making a case for those particular interventions?
Yeah, prior to the 4 different focus areas, which happened about 6 months after I joined, the first thing I did when I landed is to do focus groups with our leaders that were executive director and above, because basically the company had they didn't have a learning and development strategy at all. It was a very reactive position for the company. If someone kind of escalated and said, hey, I want to go to this conference, or I want to take this class outside, or gosh, could we do, the Strengths Finder poll? It was not consistent or universal in terms of the focus. So the first thing was what's needed the most. And that's where we got those 4 themes of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, the actual individual coaching for some, the development on competencies, and then the leadership. So then over time, we looked at, budgetary, what could we afford?
Of course.
And then where would we have the best return on investment? So that's why for the coaching, we only offered the coaching for executive director and above, but we used the Modern Health app, which gives anyone 8 coaching sessions in any kind of domain for the rest of the population. For the DEI, there was enough universal and I'd say economic ways that we could offer, speakers and get it recorded, or sessions that were like self-paced. We used LinkedIn Learning. There was ways to offer that curriculum that was pretty low cost. Where we spent more money was in leadership and the competencies, because we felt that those would be the biggest return on investment. If you have leaders that people trust and that are empowering and living through our values. That was the other thing, is we made sure that the values that were generated were kind of grassroots, and that those also aligned with the different areas of learning and development, so that they were syncing up with what the company said they valued.
What I call organizational readiness. Because I think there's a lot of solutions out there. And I think it's easy to want a, Ferrari when what your company is really ready for is a scooter. And sometimes go with the scooter, but start small and increment and build, versus going so big that then the organization, your leaders don't know how to even digest it or make the most of it. And so it's hard to then say, is it the tool? Is it the problem? Is it the solution? So really matching the organizational readiness with the potential solution. And
say more. That's really important. The organizational readiness, like how do you gauge that? What are the levers you look at? Because I get it, a vendor's going to come in and want to sell you, the platinum, when really, like you're saying, they're ready for the scooter. So how, as a people leader, do you know what is ready and what does that mean? What kind of that is ready and not ready, look like?
Yeah. I think doing a org or an analysis to be able to say, where the organization is today and where you want to take them. Is this, a incremental step?
Mhm.
Is this a major step function change that you need to go drive? Um, what other change initiatives are going on within the organization?
Mhm.
Are you fighting for attention within
Mhm.
the organization, or is this collectively across the organization and with the CEO and the leaders seen as one of the top priorities and the top problems? Because I think the higher it is on the priority list, the bigger solution or bigger impact you can have. So knowing where can be, kind of tuck-in solutions that fill a small gap that, probably requires, I look at effort impact a lot. So which ones are going to require really big effort, but that are going to drive really big impact?
Mhm.
And then ideally you can find ones that are going to have, low effort, but high impact, and
Yeah.
you can do more of those along the way. So again, thinking about it, going back to what is the problem, what is the potential solution? And it might take, that patience of it might be a multi-year journey to
Mhm.
get to where you want to go, and building on itself versus trying to do big changes too fast that
Yeah.
then fail.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would want to say or share in terms of your wisdom around helping leaders bring coaching, bring learning and development work into their organization?
I think part of it, a big word for me this year is context. And one of the things I was thinking about is, like, I didn't just assume Steve would value these things. I had to understand what his philosophy was around growth and development, what he experienced personally, good or bad, and how important he thought that was to get a gauge of how much selling I had to do or not do.
Yeah.
And so, but also, like, with our leaders, spending time and building that relationship and knowing who they are, so that when we come back and say, we've listened, we've developed this to help you, they know it's not just a program you're shoving down their face.
Yeah. Yeah.
They feel like, I'll give you a quick example. We did a book club around the 5 dysfunctions of a team. It was like 5 or 6 weeks. We ended last week and they go, can we meet at the same time next week? We want to pick the next book. Like, okay. And they said, can we open this up to the whole company? That was huge. I'm like, of course, but this came from leaders just saying, I want to know more about leadership. Like, okay, here's one way. Those of you that like to read books. And now
Yeah.
it's turned into this thing.
Yeah.
But that's, again, just we listen to what they wanted and then try to develop stuff that would, meet their felt needs.
Anytime you want a thought partner, I am happy to connect with you in any way that I can be a support. You've been very supportive to our group of people that follow us. So thank you so much.
Now that you've heard from a few HR and people ops leaders, I hope that you found a few helpful tips to get started advocating for and implementing leadership and development initiatives in your organization. For more resources on L&D, common pain points leaders face, and coaching programs for tech and biotech leaders, head over to our website at levelupeq.com.